Hey guys, it's Janae Mooney, the Upstreet Director here at Canyons Church, coming at you from our Upstreet stage. I just wanted to connect with you parents and let you know what we're doing to help keep you and your kids connected during our time away from church here. So you should have received an email from me last week with our video message and a question that you can use to talk about what it is we're talking about every single Sunday. I'm going to be sending those to you each and every week with questions just to connect you guys with the bottom line. And then also there's some resources there for you if you need them on how to talk to your kids about what's going on in the world today. If you need anything, you can reach out to me. My email is janae@canyonschurch.net, or check us out on Upstreet LCV on Facebook, our Canyons Church website, or our Canyons Church Facebook page. We hope to see you really, really soon. We miss you and love you guys.
Alone in my sorrow and dead in my sin, lost without hope with no place to begin. Your love made a way to let mercy come in. When death was arrested, my life began. Ash was redeemed, only beauty remains. My orphan heart was given a name. My mourning grew quiet, my feet rose to dance. When death was arrested, my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. Released from my chains, I'm a prisoner no more. My shame was a ransom He faithfully bore. He canceled my debt, He called me His friend. When death was arrested and my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made us new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. Savior displayed on a criminal's cross, and darkness rejoiced as though heaven had lost. But then Jesus arose with our freedom in hand. Yes, when death was arrested, my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you.
Happy Easter! Welcome to Canyons Church Online Edition. We are so glad that you have chosen to join us today. My name is Amy Powell, and at Canyons Church, our heart is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus. And one of the ways we're going to do that in this unique season is read a book together. The book we've chosen is by Clay Scroggins. It's called How to Lead in a World of Distraction. You can pick your copy up online. You can connect with your small group leader, or you can contact us at Canyons and we can order a copy for you. We've started a group on our Facebook page, and we hope you join us in connecting, talking, and chatting about how the book is impacting and affecting our lives. Also, at Canyons, we want to thank those of you who continually donate to our Fifth Sunday food drive. We have a lot of hungry families in our community, and it's one way we can make a big impact there. So we're going to continue to donate food. So if you'd like to do that, you can bring your food on Sundays or Tuesdays to Canyons Church, and we will take that to St. Vincent de Paul Social Services, and they will distribute that food for you. So thank you for doing that. Well, happy Easter. We have our band here with us today online, and we're going to continue singing a couple more songs, and then our lead pastor, Andrew Powell, is going to come out and present today's Easter message. So we hope you enjoy the service. And again, we are glad you're with us, and from our family to yours, happy Easter.
There were walls between us. By the cross you came and broke them down. You broke them down. There were chains around us. By your grace we are no longer bound. No longer bound. You called me out of the grave. You called me into the light. You called my name and then my heart came alive. Your love is greater, your love is stronger, your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. Your love is greater, your love is stronger, your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. Feel the darkness shaking, all the dead are coming back to life, back to life. Hear the song awakening, all creation singing, we're alive, 'cause you're alive. You call me out of the grave, you call me into the night. You call my name and then my heart came alive. Your love is greater, your love is stronger, your love awakens, awakens, awakens. Your love is greater, your love is stronger, your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. What a love we found, death can't hold us down. We shout it out, we're alive 'cause you're alive. What a love we found, death can't hold us down. We shout it out, we're alive 'cause you're alive. What a love we found, death can't hold us down. We shout it out, we're alive 'cause you're alive. Your love is greater, your love is stronger, your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. Your love is greater, your love is stronger, your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. Your love is greater, your love is stronger, your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. Your love is greater, your love is stronger, your love cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wounds, his hands, his feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. His body bound and drenched in tears, they laid him down in Joseph's tomb, the entrance sealed by heavy stone. Messiah still and all alone. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, oh Lord our God. Then on the third, at break of dawn, the Son of Heaven rose again. Oh, trample death, where is your sting? The angels roll for Christ our King. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, oh Lord our God. He shall return in robes of white, the blazing sun shall pierce the night, and I will rise among the saints, my gaze transfixed on Jesus' face.
Thanks for singing along with us. I hope you enjoyed having our band back up here with us. I don't know if you're standing up in front of your couch or still laying down. That's fine. No judgment here. I wanted to take a few moments and just talk to you about one of our 4 things. Intentional percentage giving is one of the 4 things that I'm going to talk about today. And if you're not part of Canyons Church, if you don't go here, if you're just kind of checking us out, no pressure right now. But what we want to know, or what I want you to know, is that this is incredibly important. That we would intentionally decide that we're going to give first, save second, and live on the rest. Why? Why is God so intentional? Why is God so, focused on my money? He's focused on your heart. And the chief competitor for your heart is your stuff. And when your focus is on in your hand and what is in your hand and what you can grip onto, what you hold onto, then you're not allowing God to actually have free access to your heart. So we want to do something about that. The chief competitor for your heart, we want to open that up and allow generosity to move in that direction, that we would open our hearts back up to God. So the way that we do this, we make a decision to be generous first and foremost, that is the priority. More than our stuff is being generous first. So we give first, we save second, and we live on the rest. Now, if you go to Canyons Church here, you can jump on our website right now. I know it's kind of difficult with our services going to online services at this moment. You can jump on our website, canyonschurch.net, and you can click the Give button, and it walks you through a very, very simple process to give online. You can also download an app. It's called Church Center, and if you download that, regardless of what device you have, find that, download it, and then search for Canyons Church in Clarkston, Washington. You'll be able to download and choose us as your home church, and then be able to watch our content, connect with us on there, as well as give through your mobile device. Let me pray, and we're going to continue on with our service. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for everything that you've done for us. God, before we ever thought about giving, before we ever thought about loving, you first loved us, and you first gave for us. Lord, I pray that we would remove any obstacle that is in our way from connecting with you and opening ourselves up to you. And God, if that is a lack of generosity in our heart, I pray that we would open ourselves up to you in that aspect. That we would recognize that first and foremost, we want you in our life. And if there's greed in the way, if there's something that we're seeking after, if we're building something on our own instead, I pray that we would focus rather on you and what you're doing and what you're able to do through us. Thank you for providing for us, God, in this difficult season that you have provided for us, and you are meeting our needs, and you are working on our behalf, even if we can't see it yet. God, you are good, and we love you so much. In your name I pray. Amen. Happy Easter. It's so good to see you guys today. I know that one of my favorite parts of Easter is to see how everyone dressed up today. So it's a little shocking how many of you are wearing bathrobes right now. I'm not sure if that was planned. Yeah, can see you. You need to cover up a little bit. Just kidding. I cannot see you. But we are super glad that you're here today. Something else that's come up lately, I once thought that I was going to be able to, with all the social distancing, that we're going to be able to relax a little bit on the exercise front. I was like, this is perfect. I don't have to feel guilty about not going to the gym or not going out. And then some of my friends decided that CrossFit was still a need to be seen on my Facebook feed. So still feel guilty about that. Not doing anything about it, but that's okay. We are so excited to be here for Easter, regardless of whether you've been working out or not, regardless of whether you're wearing your bathrobe or you put a shirt and tie on today. Congratulations if that's what you did. Today is a great day. We're going to be going through a lot of the same content that you probably would guess from Easter. This is one of those moments that you don't have to, as a pastor, I don't have to come up with something new to preach. It's going to be the same thing, right? I don't need to get creative. It's going to be the resurrection of Jesus. It's going to be this every single Easter. If you tune in next year, it's still going to be the resurrection of Jesus. Still the same thing. The reason why is because this is kind of like the Super Bowl of Christianity. This is the big show. This is the big one, right? We're really, really excited about it. This is why we're here. This is why we're here. In fact, every single week, this is why we're here, because of the resurrection of Jesus. The reason why we love Easter so much is because it answers this question, the question that we've been asking throughout this series, Bystander. This question, who is Jesus, is so difficult for the world to kind of navigate and manage through that. And this is one of the biggest questions, possibly the most important question. I would say it's the most. You might have a different idea of what the most important question is, but it's a really big one. And Easter points specifically to the answer of this question, who is Jesus? It points directly at his identity. Now, if you've been here before, you've probably heard us say some of this like this. We don't believe that Jesus rose from the dead because the Bible tells us so. It's better than that. It's bigger than that. Because Matthew and Mark, that were eyewitnesses of these proceedings, everything that happened that we're going to talk about this morning, they were there to see this, and they wrote down their accounts. And then they protected the accounts. And over years, they got collected and protected and eventually made their way into the Bible. But not just Matthew and Mark, but also Luke, who thoroughly investigates. He comes by a little bit later, and he does like a big, huge research paper on the events surrounding Jesus' life, Jesus' ministry, who he was, how all of this went down. And after he investigates, he comes to the same conclusion as the other men, the other disciples that were there. And then you have John that we've been going through with Bystander, more on him later. We also have Peter that was there firsthand, eyewitness account. He watched all of this, and then he wrote about it and dialogued about this later on. We also have James, the brother of Jesus. What would it take for your brother to convince you that he was the Son of God, the Messiah? What would it take? Because for James, all of the everything that happened before the resurrection was not enough. And maybe for you, that's a similar spot. Everything else that has been done before is like, man, that's really good. I'm not sure it proves that you're the Son of God. The resurrection for James convinced him that his brother was the Son of God. All of these things, Paul later comes along and he has an experience with Jesus, points to the same conclusion. All of these things let us know that the resurrection makes the story of Jesus worth telling. If Jesus is just a really good teacher, if he's just a friend, if he is just someone that's really, really nice and he teaches really well and he does some nice things for some folks, if that's all that he is, this story doesn't need to be retold and retold and retold. This story doesn't need to be spoken everywhere for all time. But because of the resurrection, it points forward that this is something bigger, this is something more. Even his closest friends, his closest followers, the disciples, none of them were there waiting on that Easter morning. None of them were waiting at the tomb, countdown as the sun started to rise. Here he comes, he's going to resurrect. No, none of them. Nobody expected nobody. Nobody was there expecting nobody. As close as they were, all of them had lost faith. All of them had lost hope in this moment. After the crucifixion, they'd all decided that as much hope as they had in Jesus being the Messiah, the Son of God, that he couldn't possibly be that person anymore, because the Messiah that was prophesied about for generations and generations would not be killed that easily. In fact, he hadn't even accepted the terms. He hadn't even accepted the role yet. How would he be the Messiah if he never stepped in fully into that role yet? And then he was crucified that quickly and that easily. He couldn't possibly be who they hoped for. And yet, we're going to dive into this story today. John, before all of the arrests and all of the stuff that's happening today, he's fairly well convinced at this point that Jesus is the Messiah. I mean, we just talked last week about Lazarus. We talked about how Jesus showed up very publicly in broad daylight and called someone from a tomb that had been buried for 4 days. Someone that very publicly had been known throughout the area. Someone that people had gone to his funeral, had mourned with the family, had seen him embalmed, had seen him entombed, and seen him buried. And then Jesus shows up in the middle of a day and calls him out of the tomb. This is a big, big moment. And John actually says that a lot of people, many people, started to follow and believe in him at this point, believe in Jesus at this point. But there's a problem. It was too many people. It was too many people because at this point, because there was such a great following, because there's such a great number of people that were going after Jesus, it forced the hand of the religious leaders, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They could no longer sit idle. They had to do something about this because they were going to lose their power and their authority. They were going to lose everything that they clung to. They had to do something. So they came up with this plan that they're going to somehow arrest Jesus during the Passover. They knew that he would be there in Jerusalem. He knew that they'd be in the area. And so they came up with this plan that they're going to arrest him. They're going to murder him. Now, if that's not enough, right? So the Passover starts coming in. They're already frustrated. They're already angry that he is taking away from their power, their authority. Jesus shows up. The Passover festival is a Jewish festival. This is the big one, like one of the main festivals all year long, where a ton of people show up into this area to celebrate. And they're celebrating in remembering that God saved Israel, the whole entire nation, from slavery out of Egypt. And he used a man named Moses. You may be familiar with the story. And eventually they get all of the Israelites out of Egypt, and they, over time, God leads them into their given nation, right? The promised land. So this is a big moment in Jewish history. They're remembering this moment. They're celebrating this moment. Jesus, who is also a Jew, he comes to celebrate along with. But when he shows up, the energy changes. The spotlight, rather than focusing on the actual festival, the spotlight focuses all of a sudden on Jesus. He walks into Jerusalem, and it's like a one float parade. People are screaming and shouting and yelling as Jesus enters. They're all but coronating. They're all but telling everybody else that he is the king, that he is the Messiah. It's this close. And these religious leaders are watching this happening. And it feels like a slap in the face all the more, that this man is stealing the show. He's stealing the spotlight. He's stealing their influence and their power and their authority. Jesus, a little bit later, he goes into the town. He has an upper room with the disciples. They're going to have the Passover meal. And the disciples at this point, they're probably they're blowing up the balloons. They're loading the confetti guns, the t-shirt guns. They're getting ready to celebrate. Yeah, Jesus, he's here. He's Messiah. He's ready to go. And instead, Jesus has a different conversation with them in this upper room. He starts to talk to them about the new covenant. And they were familiar that some point in time in history, there's going to be a new covenant. They'd learned from the prophets before in the Old Testament that there's going to be a new covenant. It was going to be done a different way, that this covenant, as Jesus started talking about, this covenant was going to be different. It wasn't going to be between God and a person like Abraham previously. It wasn't going to be between God and a nation like Israel. That this covenant was going to be between God and all people from all nations, from all over the world for all time. And not only that, but there's a new command. Not commands, not a long list of do's and don'ts, but there was one new command that encapsulated everything. It was simply this: to love others as Jesus loved them, as he exemplified to them. Just watch what he does and then treat people that way. And that night, as they sat around, they had this meal and Jesus was serving them, they probably thought, oh my goodness, you're serving us so well. This is what love looks like. Little did they know that the next hours of their life would incredibly blow away those preconceived notions of what love looked like. That he would lay down his life and he would walk through the most brutal torture all the way to the cross to be crucified on their behalf, on your behalf, on my behalf. And that is what true love actually looks like. We're going to start off shortly after he's arrested in the dark of night. And then they have like a mock trial where they try to take him and they try to convict him of something. Nothing sticks and they can't get the right witnesses and they can't get the right witness to say the right words in order to convict him. Finally, they kind of make it stick. They come up with a Trump charge, a fake charge. They arrest him. They take him actually to the governor, the Roman governor, early the next morning because they want a crucifixion. And within the Jewish culture, they can't force the crucifixion. It has to be from Rome. So they take him to the Roman governor, Pilate, and they have Pilate interview him, and Pilate says, I don't know what you guys are talking about. This man is innocent. He hasn't done anything wrong at this point. And he's looking at the crowd that is so angry. They're so upset. He looks at this crowd and he thinks, if I just release Jesus without doing anything, they will riot. There will be blood in the streets. Something needs to happen. So he thought, well, if I punish Jesus, even though he hasn't done anything wrong, if I punish him, maybe then their rage, their anger, their hatred will subside. Maybe then they will back off from what they want. They won't actually ask for his head. And so he has Jesus flogged. This is horrible. This is a cat of nine tails, which is a whip with a bunch of different lashes on it. And each one has glass and metal and bone fragments tied into it. So as each whip comes back across the body of Jesus, the person that's being whipped, it just tears flesh from the bones of the person. It takes them within an inch of their life. Sometimes it went too far and actually killed them. So Jesus goes through this whole process. Pilate's hoping that the crowd is going to be satiated, that they're going to say, okay, that's enough. We don't need to go all the way. And instead, they're enraged all the more and start screaming and shouting, crucify him, crucify him. So at this point, chapter 19, verse 16. So the soldiers took charge of Jesus. Carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side, and Jesus in the middle. It's interesting, there's not a lot of detail in this moment. In fact, throughout the Gospels, the crucifixion, this moment, there's not a tremendous amount of detail. Why? It's almost like there's so much trauma that they experience, like someone that's been through a horrible trauma in their own life, that they don't want to open up again to that moment. In fact, the audience in this when these stories are being recorded, the audience would be so familiar that they wouldn't want to read it. They wouldn't want to hear about it again and again and again. So the details are kind of minimal here. John is actually standing there. He's watching all of this happen. He's standing next to Jesus' mother, Mary. And they're watching. He's watching his friend. She's watching her son be crucified, hanging on a cross. And with some of Jesus' last words, he looks down to John and asks him to take care of his mother while he's gone. Can you imagine the emotional weight in this moment? John that is processing the hopes of his friend becoming the Messiah, who he thought was the Messiah, who he thought was the Son of God, to seeing this friend that had done nothing wrong hanging on the cross, moments away from death. It's crushing. It's excruciating to experience that moment. And then John records that Jesus says, it is finished. And in verse 30, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Now, John pauses and does something a little bit unique in this moment. He actually reaches back from the present audience and he reaches into the future. And he starts talking about the validity of what he's telling you in verse 35. He says, the man who saw it has given the testimony, and his testimony is true. I swear to you, it's true. What I'm telling you is absolutely true. He knows that he tells the truth, and he testifies so that. Why would he do this? Why would he leverage his own voice? Why would he leverage his own life? Because essentially, that's what was chased down. That's what people tried to take from him from that point moving on because of telling this story. So that, why? So that you also may believe. That you may believe who Jesus is. That's the whole point. That's why it was worth it for these men that were eyewitnesses, that gave their eyewitness testimonies to the audience there that also recorded it, and they wrote down and they protected it over years and years and years. And eventually, it got transformed from eyewitness accounts and collected and put together in the Bible. But for a long time, it was just known as eyewitness accounts. These men's experiences, how they perceived, how they experienced Jesus' ministry, what they watched and heard him do. And I think that's what we should look at in these moments also, that this is eyewitness testimony from these men. Now, if you're here and you're thinking, okay, John, yeah, I believe what you're saying. I'm with you all the way. I mean, yeah, he does some pretty amazing things early on, and those are hard to wrap my mind around, but I guess I'll roll with you there. And at this point, yeah, I've heard sad stories before. I can believe that. I'll jump into that because I've seen sad stories in my life. But John says, no, I'm asking you to believe what I'm saying, not because of what's happened already, but because of what's about to happen. It's not just that he died on a cross. There's something I'm about to tell you. There's something I'm about to explain to you. The next several days, that's the almost impossible, the seeming impossible part that we have to wrestle with and come to terms with. This is the crux of the message. He jumps back into the story, verse 38. Later, Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. With Pilate's permission, he came and took the body away. He had to ask permission because someone that was crucified within the culture there, they could not be legally buried. They had to be thrown out like trash onto the trash heaps and let the wild animals do with the bodies as they will. He was accompanied by Nicodemus, the man who earlier had visited Jesus at night. Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. Now, if you think that this person is going to be resurrected, if you think that this person he's going to do a miracle somehow, you probably wouldn't be packing and hauling with you 75 pounds of embalming material with you. All of these men that were closest to Jesus, every single one of them, all of the women that were right by his side, all of the people that followed Jesus so earnestly, none of them expected a miracle in this moment. They expected Jesus' body to do what dead bodies do. Stay dead. Now, continuing on. Verse 40. Taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped it with the spices and strips of linen. This was in accordance with the Jewish burial customs. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden, a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid. Because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. And then there's kind of radio silence for a little while. We don't have details as far as what happened to the disciples in this moment from Friday night to throughout Saturday. We don't know exactly what happened. I can assume and imagine that these men feared for their lives. They thought, we're next on the list. And so they dispersed, they tried to hide, they tried to go out, wherever they could that felt safe to them. A lot of them, though, actually grouped together in a house, in a room together. And I'm sure that as they were sitting there, all of these events happened so rapidly, so quickly. I mean, they were this close to coronating him as the Messiah, the King of Israel, right? And then all of a sudden, it changed. All of a sudden, it was 180-degree different from their expectations. And I'm sure that as they're processing all of these moments, from the beating, the arrest, the beating, to the flogging, to the crucifixion, the whole entire thing, that another wave of emotion hits them. There probably was not a lot of sleep that was happening that night, Friday night. Probably not a lot of sleep that was happening Saturday night. They probably were just were so overwhelmed with the struggle, with the pain, with the deep felt of loss from a hope, from a Messiah, but also from a friend that they'd followed for several years now. And then there's a knocking on the door on early Sunday morning. Their probably initial thought was, this is the guards, they're after us, they're going to come and get us right now. And then they'd think that through, and the guards wouldn't have knocked. They just would have burst through the doors and come and got them. So they open the door, and it's Mary Magdalene. This woman that had followed Jesus, this woman that was very close to him, this woman that had experiences with him of how he loved her and how he loved other people and how she watched him treat other people. And her life was changed because of Jesus. And she's distraught and she's upset and she's probably sobbing in this moment. And what she says next points to the fact that they don't assume a miracle. They don't assume resurrection. They assume grave robbers. She says, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him. You see, she and a bunch of women that morning had gone to kind of say their final farewells and add to the embalming, add their own spices onto his body. But when they got there, he was gone. So she's distraught. The other disciples think that someone's stolen the body. And this is where we're going to pick up with John and Peter, Simon Peter, actually. So in chapter 20, verse 3. So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter. The other disciple that he's listing here, that's John. So the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first, which I really enjoy these verses right here, because I like to think that throughout their relationship, throughout their friendship, that John and Peter had this kind of back and forth. Because it's not super important that we know that John beat Peter to the tomb. But I think that they have an ongoing joke that John's like, hey, Peter, you remember when we both thought that there was grave robbers and Jesus' body was stolen? Do you remember who showed up first? Do you remember who got to the tomb first? I don't remember. Could you just refresh my memory? Oh yeah, it was me. Oh yeah, I got there. I'm sure that he chuckled as he told this story to the scribe that was taking down his story in his old age. Peter, his friend from long ago, had passed away from Nero's Rome, had actually taken his life. And he's probably chuckling as he's telling the story like, I gotta add this into it just to be factually accurate and correct. But then he continues on and he gets back to another factually correct moment. He says he bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. You see, he says, yeah, I beat him there, but I was too afraid. I didn't go in. Why wouldn't he go in? Well, for one, it's a dark tomb. No one's really super excited about going into a dark tomb. Secondly, the burial clothes that Jesus was in are lying there, meaning if someone stole the body, they took the time to unwrap the body from the embalming. Who does that? Who would do that? Who thinks that they have enough time to do that? So John kind of pauses, and then it picks up, and it shows us that Peter runs right in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. This isn't surprising at all. This is the same Peter that when he saw Jesus walking on the water in the middle of the storm, wanted Jesus to ask him to jump over the boat to walk with him, and he does it. This is the same Peter that thinks later and acts first. He just jumps right in. He just runs right into the tomb. As he continues on, he saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. So he sees the cloth, the linen, all of these things are lying there. They're not in a heap. They're not in a big mess. They're orderly. Almost as if the body had just removed itself from the linens there. Something changed in this moment for these men. Something changed forever, not just for the men, but for all of us in this moment. John continues on. Finally, the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside. And as he saw this, as he surveyed the scene, he saw and he believed. This is John's equation the whole entire time. To see and to believe. Throughout Bystander, we've been talking about that John watched things, and after watching them, after experiencing them, after witnessing them, then he believed. And in this moment, he believed. He recognized after seeing Jesus, after he saw Jesus get arrested, after he saw Jesus get beaten, after he saw Jesus get flogged, after he saw Jesus hanging from a cross and give up his last breath, after he saw Jesus buried in this tomb, now he saw the clothes, the death clothes, the grave clothes that were no longer on Jesus because Jesus was no longer there. And it wasn't because someone stole him. It was because Jesus got up and walked out from the tomb. This changes everything. This changes everything. Who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. This is what John is processing in this moment, that Jesus is who he claimed to be. That he knows that Jesus is alive again. And that his hopes that Jesus was the Messiah are now confirmed. Even though he'd lost his hope for a little while, even though he's lost his faith for a little while, now it's confirmed. Now he knows. Now he believes that Jesus is the Messiah, that this punctuates what his claims were as radical and as out there as they may have seemed. This punctuates them. Now, the other disciples, the men, they see Jesus. There's several different moments of this that are recorded in other Gospels. There's a moment that John records of Jesus showing up into the upper room. But we're going to pick up a little bit later in verse 24 of chapter 20. Now Thomas, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." Where the spear had pierced his side, where the nails had been put through and nailed through his hands, his wrists, his feet. He says, "Unless I see it for myself, I won't believe it. Even though all of you in here are telling me what you saw, I can't believe it unless I see it." That's not so hard to believe that Thomas, even though he'd seen Jesus, even though he'd seen all the signs and wonders before, that he would hesitate in this moment, that he would want to see it first for himself. Maybe that's where you're at also. Like, man, I would love to believe that. I would love to take a step, but I just don't know. I just need to see it. It's hard for me to take a step without seeing it first. Jesus does something specific and unique for Thomas. So about a week later, his disciples were in the house again. And Thomas was with them this time. The first time Thomas had wandered off, he was hiding somewhere. He wasn't with them when Jesus showed up. This time he's with them. And in verse 27, continuing on in verse 26. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands? Reach out your hand and put it into my side." Jesus greets the whole crowd and everybody again. "Peace be with you." This is something that he told them on a regular basis. They'd heard him say this when the storms would rise in the boat. He'd say, "Peace." This is familiar to them. But then he addresses Thomas. He says, I know what your hesitations were. That you needed to see it. You needed to see the holes. You needed to feel it with your hand. Come and do that. And he tells him, don't feel too bad about all this. Because these other guys didn't believe it until they saw it either. Do not be unbelieving, but believing. This is probably a better interpretation for this verse. Don't be unbelieving, but believing. Don't be unbelieving, but believing. This is what Jesus tells him. And he gets labeled Thomas the Doubter, doubting Thomas. But if you look at the actual story, everybody doubted it until they saw. All the other disciples doubted until they saw. It's understandable in this moment. So Jesus says, and he says to you and me also, don't be unbelieving, but believing. Then Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have believed. Because you've seen me, you have believed. And then Jesus reaches forward from this moment into the future generations, all the way to you and to me in the present time. And he says this, blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. You see, John invites us to see these moments through his eyes. Even though we aren't there 2,000 years ago, we can still trust. We can still read John's account as a trustworthy eyewitness account of these moments. And if we do that, if we see it for what it's worth, if we see it for the truth that is presented, if we see that Jesus resurrected, we know his identity. It is clear that he is the Son of God. He is the Messiah. John actually, he wrote earlier in his account in chapter 3. You've probably heard some of this before. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. It continues on. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Jesus didn't show up to tell the world how bad it was. And Jesus didn't show up to remove all the pain and all the suffering from the world. Jesus showed up to be with us in life. And not only that, but to invite us to everlasting, eternal life, both in the future and right now. That life abundant, more and greater than what you've experienced before. That is the life that we're invited into because of who Jesus is and because of what he did. That when he conquers death, we can look at death differently because of that moment. Then John, skipping back, the other end piece, the other bookend here, back in chapter 20, verse 30. This is where he starts to explain and express the purpose for his whole entire account that he's sharing with us. Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written, that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. This is the whole thing. This is why John is willing to risk his life by sharing this story, sharing his experience with us. John did not back away from these claims. John leaned in. He leveraged everything. His livelihood, the safety, his own safety, the safety of his family. He leveraged everything he could in order to tell us the story, the truth about what happened, and the truth about who Jesus was. And when we see it through John's eyes, it is clear. When we see all of these signs and the evidence, as broad as it is, it points in a direction. That's why he calls them signs, because they're pointing in a direction. Direction that the evidence shows us is the identity of Jesus. That's something that you can believe in. That's something that you can trust in and place your weight on. And I don't know where you're at this morning, this afternoon, this evening, whenever you're watching this. I don't know where you're at on your faith journey. But I would like to invite you to look through this moment through John's eyes. Someone that did not gain from his experiences here as far as, telling the story over and over again. Only was losing life, only was being threatened with life from that point forward. But still saw it worth to share his story in order for future generations, in order for you and me to experience, to see this through his eyes. This bystander that would say, I was just a fisherman. That for some reason, Jesus chose me. And I would say to you also, that Jesus chooses you, and it's our opportunity to accept his invitation, to accept his forgiveness for our sins, the sin debt that he paid on the cross, the death that he conquered, and to walk into a relationship with the Heavenly Father and the chance to call God our Father. It's an amazing, amazing opportunity. Could be the best opportunity in my opinion. But it all comes from this one question: who is Jesus? That is absolutely punctuated, that is absolutely defined in this Easter moment. Would you pray with me? Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for today. I thank you for the opportunities that you've given us to trust you. God, that when we see no end in sight, when we don't know what's around the corner, when we don't know what's going to happen, that you do. You are there with us. And you don't guarantee that this life is going to be easy. You don't guarantee that the pain is going to be removed. But what you do promise is that you will be with us, that you are for us, that you love us, that regardless of what is in our past, regardless of what we've done before, you are still willing and choosing to lay down your life, to love us with your whole life in order for us to have a relationship with you. So God, I pray that regardless of where we're at in our faith journey, that we would consider possibly taking a step forward, a step towards trust, a step towards faith, a step towards believing that what we heard is true from John and the rest of the eyewitnesses. God, we thank you for saving these documents over time in antiquity. We thank you for the opportunity that we have today to make a simple choice that is forever changing our lives. We love you, Lord. In your name I pray. Amen.
between us. How high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadow of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope.
Who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. The cross has spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Jesus Christ, my living hope.
Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Jesus, yours is a victory. Hallelujah.
Well, thanks for joining us for Easter this year. We are so glad that you tuned in, and I hope that was helpful and encouraging to you. And we hope you have a great week. Please connect with us online. Grab that book, and all together we'll start going through how to lead in a world of distraction. And come on back next week for our new series that we'll launch. We'll see you then.